Guys, happy Monday. Welcome to another vlog. So we are going to go through the weekly TBR. Let me get this stacked. We are starting the day, even though today I'm not going to be able to get into it. I hope I'm not in the middle of the story, but I am. This is my short story collection that I'm reading, Nobody Gets It Alive by Lee Newman. This is an interconnected short story of people living in Alaska. Next, we have the book that I'm starting today that's on my TBR, and that is Whoa, A House Cat's Story of Despair by Lucy Kinsley, all about the author's cat. It's a graphic novel. I love cats, and I love graphic novels about animals, so hopefully this is a hit. Next, we have my mood read that I'm doing the audiobook for, and that is A Mystery of Mysteries, The Death and Life of Edgar Allan Poe. This one I have read 100 pages in. I started yesterday, and it's all about unraveling who Edgar Allan Poe was and the mystery of his death. Lastly, we have my ebook, and that is Founding Mothers, The Women Who Raised Our Nation by Cokie Roberts. This is all about the women behind the men. Reading update time and kind of review. It is a review. So I finished Whoa, and I liked it. I would say it's in the 3-star. I don't want to say it's a straight up 3. I would say probably like a 3.25 because I don't see myself rereading this, but I did like it. Now this is listed as, yeah, kids graphic. I think I would say this is more young adult. There were some larger words and kind of dark themes because it's about a cat that's passed away. So but yeah, I mean, there's gonna be teenagers who are younger teenagers that have lost pets, so it's a sad theme. But yeah, so I would say this is for maybe like 15 and up is who I would say it's for, but again, that's up for the parents to decide of what they let their kids read. So I did like it. I liked this cat. I thought he was pretty funny. It did make me laugh out loud, and I do like all the colors that are used, but no, we're not gonna get into the negatives yet because I still have positives to say. And it made me like feel like I only saw my cats were weird. Maybe they're not that weird. Maybe other cats are just like them. They're house cats. But I didn't really like the formatting. It was just, as you can see, in these little circles and very sporadic. I don't know if y'all could see that. It was just a very sporadic and choppy kind of formatting, and I wasn't a huge fan of that. So that's my only complaint. I liked it. It was good. I didn't love it. It's not a new favorite, but I would recommend getting it on ebook or whatever. I've never done a graphic novel in the e-format, so I don't know exactly what it's called, or getting this at your library rather than purchasing it. But I did like it. So if you are a cat person, I do think this would make a good gift if you know like a cat person. Definitely think of picking this up for them because there's just going to be a lot as a cat owner that you can relate to. But the next book on my TBR, and it's the last book on my TBR this month, is Tip and Run by Edward Pace. This is a non-fiction. I think it's which World War is it during? I am not seeing. 2 weeks after the armistice. Was that World War I or II? Why am I blanking? And this book looks like this and has this. So will I die from this? Is this mold? I'm going to have to look because, you know. Yeah, so this is the First World War, and it says 2 weeks after the armistice was signed in Europe, British and German troops were still at war in Africa. After 4 years of what one campaign historian described as a war of extermination and attrition without parallel in modern times. The most tragic consequences of the two sides' deadly game of tip and run was the devastation of an area 5 times the size of Germany, and civilian suffering on a scale unimaginable in Europe. Such was the cost of the white man's palaver. So that's what I'm going to be starting next. I think I'm going to be doing it as an ebook. I have to see what I have listed in here because, yeah, I am kind of paranoid about the condition of that book. So yes, I say I have it as an ebook, so I'm gonna have to just double check and see if I have an ebook, and I need to mark off that I read. Whoa. But there's that update. I will start this book at 7. It is currently 6:19. Time to talk about what I read in Tip and Run. So this was supposed to be an ebook this month, but there's actually not an ebook for this month, but the audiobook was free with my Audible subscription until the 30th. So I do think I can read it in 7 days, because it's less than 500 pages, probably even less than, yeah, it's less than 400 pages, because we have appendix, the notes, bibliography. I'm trying, what is index? Index is the word that I was trying to think of, and cat content coming in. Go please. Okay, so I have been listening to this. I did read along with some of it, but the other stuff is when I worked on my peanuts. It's a great pumpkin thing, and I will be doing some more of that later. So I do want to go through some of my notes. I took the notes on my phone, and I really wanted to copy and paste, because I took pictures of the pages. I wanted to copy from the image, but it did it like this, and even though when I copy and pasted it, it was straight line, so I don't know why it showed up like that, which is really annoying. So one thing that I found interesting is, so all this is taking place basically in the days leading up to what we know as World War I, what you learn in school as World War I. So the first British shots of the Great War were not fired in Europe, but by a regimental sergeant major of the West African Frontier Force in German Togoland. So I thought that was interesting, because I never knew about that. And many people in Europe had no idea what was going on in Africa at this time. Now, there were the wars in like South Africa. If you've watched Downton Abbey, the like dad on the show was a veteran of those wars, the Boer, I don't know how you pronounce that, but those wars had happened previously, again, like in South Africa, and those were very, like, they were in the news. They were, kids were reading about it in like books that were for children. So that's about 50 years before what we're dealing with in here with the First World War. Okay, so let's go into some of my highlights now that I highlighted from the book. So again, I didn't know anything was going on in Africa during the First World War. I knew in the Second World War, because I do have an ancestor who was in the Sahara during the Second World War, but I don't know anything about all my ancestors who were in the First World War were in Europe, so on the Western Front. So this is in East Africa where we are focusing right now, and mainly the Germans and English, because that's who, you know, we think of when we think the World Wars. So the English capital of East Africa was Nairobi, and the German capital was Dar es Salaam. And I didn't even know the Germans had stuff in Africa. I knew like South Africa was like Dutch or German or something, but and I wasn't even thinking of colonialism during this time period. I know, crazy, because I knew in my mind when these countries in Africa, if they have gained independence, I knew, like, you know, that was usually during the mid-century, but I never thought of, oh, what were these countries doing during the First World War? And I know that in the movie 1917, you will see British soldiers of all different races, because the British Empire, and I know the British Empire was a thing, but I just never thought of it. Ignorance on my part, yes, but I'm learning about it now, and that's what is so great about reading and about learning. You just learn so much, and your worldview is just expanded, and that is amazing. So I didn't know there were German colonies in Africa, so I had no idea that any of this was happening. So that being said, let's go back to the what I have highlighted here. So the death toll among African soldiers, so these are indigenous Africans, these are, you know, people from Africa. The death toll among African soldiers and military carriers recruited from the British East Africa alone exceeded 45,000, or 1 in 8 of the country's adult male population. And among all British Imperial combatant and support units who took to the field in the East Africa theater of the war, the official death toll exceeded 100,000 men. This equated to the number of British soldiers killed in the carnage on the Somme between July and November 1916, or to America's total war dead in the Great War. And obviously there's going to be all those who weren't accounted for, so it's probably closer to double that number. And that is crazy, and I had never known about this. And this became a very popular thing, like pop culture. You know, pop culture at the time was influenced by this. Again, something that I had never known about. So the absurdity of fighting a war in as hostile an environment as could be imagined, the odd episode of high adventure that were destined to permeate the public imagination. So some of the works that were inspired by this were The African Queen, Shout at the Devil, William Boyd's Booker Prize nominated An Ice Cream War, and even the young Indiana Jones and the River of Death, Tarzan the Untamed, and Tarzan the Terrible. Who knew? And then this is just a quote that started out in chapter 1 that said, "Imagine a country 3 times the size of Germany, mostly covered by dense bush with no roads and only 2 railways, and either sweltering under a tropical sun or swept by a torrential rain, which makes the friable soil impassable to wheeled traffic. A country with occasional wide and swampy areas interspersed with arid areas where water is often more precious than gold, in which man rots with malaria and suffers torments from insect pests, in which animals die wholesale from the ravage of the Tessie fly, TSE, where crocodiles and lions seize unwary porters, giraffes destroy telegraph lines, elephants damage tracks, hippopotami attack boats, rhinoceroses charge troops on the march, and bees put whole battalions to fight. Such was German East Africa in 1914 to 18. That was definitely wild for the Western mind at that time. I can definitely see why it had such an influence, and you would have thought they would be showcasing this more. Also, a thing is, these places in Africa were kind of seen as a haven away from the war in Europe, but they didn't know war was coming for them. They didn't want the indigenous and native populations to know that the white people were going to war, because they didn't want them to have an uprising. So there's a lot of colonialism themes, so if you're interested in that, this would be a good pickup. I'm only 5% into the book, and then all about what was happening in Africa in this time period. I'm learning a lot so far. I am here to give y'all an update on a Mystery of Mysteries. I only read 11 pages, but I have 4 notes. So my first one is, I kind of thought of this yesterday. So I think Edgar Allan Poe is an INFP personality type, which is what I am. And y'all know, or maybe you don't, but back in the summer we read a biography on Princess Diana. That's when I read that made me want to pick up this, because I'm pretty sure she was an INFP, but I've seen iffy things because for somebody that famous, there's going to be so much out there on the internet. So I think those kind of people, not me personally, I'm not lonely anymore, but I think a lot of those people are lonely and just want to feel a part of something. And I think today, like, I'm blessed that there's the internet and you can just find communities online, when back then it was definitely harder to find community. Another one is, this book was jolting to come back to. So yesterday we ended off when Poe married his, literally, like, I think she was like 13-year-old cousin when he was a grown-ass man. So that's where I ended off yesterday, was them getting married. And then when I pick up the book today, we're back to the other timeline of a few months from his death, and he's in love with this widow who was like his high school sweetheart, you know, 1800s style. And okay, this is, so it was jolting just going back to, because I was like, wait, I thought we were with his cousin Virginia yesterday. And then it's, yeah, the timeline just skin back into the book can be a bit jolting. This is such a random comparison, but it reminds me of the Grinch. The Grinch didn't fit in, and then he had, who is the woman? The woman who had a crush on him, but she married like the mayor, and then, but I think she might have got with the Grinch at the end. That was the vibe that it was giving. But the letter about cholera, he sent a letter saying he had like stuff going on with his mind and brain, because of the cholera. So it's never been confirmed if he actually had cholera or not. They have done testing on his hair like they have with Otzi the Iceman. We've talked about Otzi before. I love him. And they did it on somebody else. Was it George Washington? It was another famous figure. So when they can do testing on a strand of hair, because Poe would cut his hair and gave it to somebody apparently, but like with mummies, that's the thing with Otzi. Otzi the Iceman, he was murdered and his body frozen in the Alps for thousands of years. So the ice preserved his body, and therefore they could take DNA from him, and you can just see what has been in a person's system. Like with Otzi, they could tell that he was likely a what is that called? Like, it wouldn't be a blacksmith. This is the Bronze Age. So like, but he was doing bronze stuff, making stuff with bronze because of just some particles that were in his hair. So with Edgar Allan Poe, there was particles of mercury, but not mercury high enough that he would have died of mercury poisoning, but mercury was used to treat cholera back in the 1800s. So that is why. And there was a big cholera epidemic at this time. Philadelphia wasn't hit as hard as some other cities, which Philadelphia was where Poe was at the time. So he might have got it. We don't know. So, but he did mention in a letter saying, my mind has been confused or something because of the cholera. So it's like, is that hinting that he had cholera and that caused some kind of mental break, something going on in his head, and that's what caused the delirium and confusion when he died? They don't know, but I think he had cholera and it had some kind of impact on him. So far with the book, 30 something, what was it, 45% on the audiobook, I think that's going to be cause of death. And then at the end, he sees a meteor, and y'all know I saw a meteor before, and it was like one of the highlights of my life. So certainly during the last few days in Richmond, many friends and acquaintances described his mood as upbeat. That seemed to be the case when he bid farewell to the Talley family on September 25th. He was the last to leave the party at Talavera that night. The parting image was for Susan Archer Talley, both symbolic of his life and sadly prophetic of his death. We were standing on the portico, and after going a few steps, he paused, turned again, and lifted his hat in a last adieu. At that moment, a brilliant meteor appeared in the sky directly over his head. Like, oh my gosh, I love that. So that's where I'm going to be ending the vlog. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you made it all the way through, leave a Halloween emoji, maybe a raven emoji in the comments below. And as always, comment, rate, and subscribe. Don't forget to ring that notification bell to be notified when all my videos go live. I'll see you in my next one. Bye!